Hello, good evening, and thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Burman. So a second strike. The White House revealing the Secretary of War allowed for a follow-up killing against drug boat terrorists. Both sides of the aisle now wondering if that's a war crime.
The president has a right to take them out if they are threatening the United States of America and if they are bringing illegal narcotics that are killing our citizens at a record rate, which is what they are doing.
And as the White House mounts its defense, which you heard there, a major meeting at this hour as the commander-in-chief plots a potential move inside Venezuela, plus the asylum pause. Just how long might that last as a radicalized Afghan kills a National Guard member from West Virginia? We are asking the administration. Also this evening, the suspected killer in court, Luigi Mangione, back before a judge as his attorneys try to toss potential evidence in the killing of the United Healthcare executive. And Minnesota's missing money, how President Trump and Governor Tim Walz's new feud centers around a $1 billion bust. But first tonight, the dronings, the dictator, and the decision. A live look right now at the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, as the Trump administration says the commander-in-chief and his top team are meeting today with major questions involving Venezuela. The White House tonight standing firmly behind the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, after confirming a second strike was ordered on September 2nd, when the first strike didn't kill everyone on this suspected drug boat. Questions now from both sides of the aisle about whether that is a war crime. And this evening, the White House, their meeting there comes just hours after President Trump told NewsNation aboard Air Force One that he spent part of his holiday break on the phone with Nicolas Maduro.
I don't want to comment on it. The answer is yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about it?
No, I can't do that.
Mr. President, would you say it went well?
No, I wouldn't say it went well or badly. It was a phone call.
The former head of the Intelligence Committee with us in a moment on what could come next. But first, to our Hannah Brandt, live at the White House with the pushback and the major players in the Oval Office today. Hannah?
Hi, Blake. Tonight, President Trump meeting with his national security team to talk about next steps in Venezuela. This all comes as the White House, as you mentioned, is defending Secretary Hegseth amid that reporting that he specifically ordered the killing of survivors on that very first boat strike. President Trump saying Hegseth told him he did not specifically order the military to kill crew members, and the president saying he believes the secretary. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt doubling down on that defense earlier today, calling these strikes lawful. Take a listen.
President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes.
Now, leaders of the Armed Services Committees in the House and Senate are launching bipartisan investigations, with some members of Congress warning if this reporting is true, Hegseth's order would constitute a war crime. Senator Mark Kelly is one of those expressing concerns. He's a Democrat who the Pentagon is currently investigating for a video he was part of where he urged American troops to not follow illegal orders. But Senator Kelly says he's pushing for these congressional committees to hold public hearings on the strikes to get to the bottom of this new report.
If there is anyone who needs to answer questions in public and under oath, it is Pete Hegseth.
And Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer also saying today, if President Trump does conduct strikes on Venezuela, he will file a war powers resolution. That resolution would try and use congressional action to block troops in Venezuela. Schumer saying Republican Senator Rand Paul would help lead that push. Blake?
Hannah Brandt, live for us over tonight at the White House. Hannah, thank you. Joining us now, Republican from Ohio, former chair of the Select Intelligence Committee, Congressman Mike Turner, currently a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, nice to see you again. Thanks for being back with us tonight here on the Hill. So there's really two things to get to. One, what the commander-in-chief decides to do next, potentially inside Venezuela, and then to that strike on September 2nd. Let's start there. When the first strike happened, Congressman, there were survivors. And then the second strike came to kill them. Should that second strike have occurred?
Well, Blake, actually, you're reporting information that we don't currently have, and the White House has not confirmed that. I have the transcript of the press conference, and that's not currently the information that has either been provided to Congress or that the White House confirmed in their press conference. What they indicated was Admiral Bradley conducted this operation. As you know, the Secretary said that he did not order the killing of survivors, which is what was reported in the Washington Post. The Congress has not had any information that is what occurred. Now, on a bipartisan basis, the chair and the ranking member of both the House and the Senate Armed Services Committee indicated that this particular strike, that they would do oversight, and they are. In fact, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was on the phone with all four of those individuals, and the committees, of course, will, in classified work, receive information about these. They've been doing in classified sessions, receiving information about these strikes and about the operations that the department has undertaken.
Let me rephrase it this way.
The information that you've said is not actually what the White House has confirmed, and no one has said what you have said to either the committees or to members of Congress.
Let me rephrase
that has
this
not
way.
been transmitted to Congress.
Let me rephrase this way, Congressman. Should that second strike have occurred?
Well, at this point, again, no one has, we do not have any information as to the circumstances of the second strike. Now, that's what Congress is going to be reviewing. And when they review that information, obviously that's what the oversight is going to be. Now, the Intelligence Committee on the Senate side, members have already confirming that they're going to be receiving information. The Armed Services Committee on the House and Senate are both going to be receiving information. Now, what's important about this is that the information that was in the Washington Post is just reports. That's all that has occurred, is that it is a report. And now, at this point, what you have is that Congress is working on a bipartisan basis. Now, when members of Congress have been asked the legal question of if that report was true, would that be an illegal act? Yes. The information that was reported in the Washington Post would be an illegal act. Now, the President of the United States and the Secretary have both said that the Secretary denies that that's what the Secretary that the Secretary did not undertake that act as described in the Washington Post. Now, what the two committees are going to be doing is they're inquiring as to the circumstances. They'll receive that information, and it will be bipartisan. So you'll have Congress and both committees will undertake its work.
What do you believe the policy should be, sir, when it comes to striking these suspected drug boats?
Well, it's to follow the law, Blake. I mean, and that's what certainly that both the committees and both committees in its work, both in its classified session and in its public sessions, have been directing the Secretary and the Department to do. And I think certainly on a bipartisan basis, you're going to see members of Congress be absolutely committed to. Now, the Secretary has said that he's committed to that. The President of the United States has said he's committed to that. And what you're going to see up here on Capitol Hill is people reviewing and applying the facts and circumstances. You know, Admiral Bradley has indicated that this occurred under his direction. He will be obviously questioned and have to describe what occurred, and then the committees will have to do their work.
Do you have faith?
But no one at this point has any information that anything has occurred as an illegal act up here on Capitol Hill at this time.
Do you have faith in the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth?
I have faith that absolutely this Congress is going to do vigorous oversight, as they have said, and I believe that the Secretary will comply with that oversight. And I believe that the Secretary, has made a public statement that what has been reported in the Washington Post is not how the Secretary has acted, and I cannot believe that his statement is going to be proven to be inaccurate.
That's September 2nd. Let me move you to the issue really before the commander-in-chief tonight, which is what to do next. As I mentioned to our audience here on News Nation or those listening to us on SiriusXM, you were the former chair of the Intelligence Committee. Here was Caroline Leavitt earlier today, and then I want to pick it up on the other side.
I will confirm that the president will be meeting with his national security team on this subject and on many matters. He meets with his national security team quite often. He's the commander-in-chief. It's part of his responsibility. There's many options at the president's disposal that are on the table, and I'll let him speak on those.
What do you think the realistic options are, Congressman, for the president tonight, and what do you believe he should do?
Well, at this point, the president has not provided any information to Congress that would indicate that there's going to be ground action in Venezuela, if that is your question. And I think the president needs to provide information, certainly make the case to Congress so that we have a full understanding prior to any action occurring in a way where we understand what the goals and objectives are if there's any undertaking that's going to occur where an attack on Venezuela would occur.
Do you think? Do you believe that Congress has deserved a vote? That that if there is any action, and I stress if, that it should start with a vote.
Well, it depends.
Yourself, your colleagues.
At this point, I wouldn't want to speculate as to what that information is. We have not been given that information. I think the president should provide the information to Congress prior to the action occurring, and we certainly don't have it at this point.
Do you believe Nicolas Maduro stays in power do you think he's in power by the end of the year?
I wouldn't want to speculate, Blake. Your guess is as good as mine.
All right, Mike Turner, Republican from Ohio, House Armed Services Committee,
Thanks,
former Intel chair. Nice to see you again, sir. Thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate it. Well, still to come tonight here on the Hill, the blame game. The Trump administration pointing to the Biden administration for the vetting of an Afghan national tied to last week's shooting of 2 National Guard troops.
Nearly 100,000 Afghans were recklessly released into the United States with little to no vetting.
But former Intel officials say the vetting process was airtight. So what actually happened? Former ICE Director Ron Vitello with us live, plus a suspected killer in court. The man accused of murdering a healthcare CEO in a courtroom today as his lawyers try to get evidence wiped. And will a Democrat pull off a Music City miracle in Tennessee tomorrow? We'll explain. I thank you for being with us tonight. Other side of the break, we'll be back 4 minutes after.
The Trump administration is now actively re-examining all of the Afghans imported into the country by Joe Biden. Any individual who threatens our national security or our citizenry will be subject to removal.
The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt today announcing that Afghan refugees released into the country are now under review. Leavitt blaming the Biden administration for letting them in after the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. This as there are positive signs from the surviving victim of last week's shooting of 2 National Guard members here in Washington. The West Virginia governor saying today that Air Force Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf gave a thumbs up that he could hear a nurse's question, even wiggled his toes. A second National Guard member, Sarah Beckstrom, died from her wounds. The suspect, an Afghan refugee who reportedly underwent years of CIA and DHS vetting. Since the shooting, President Trump announced that he is permanently pausing immigration from 19 countries. You see him here all around the world, calling them, quote, third world. Here now, senior advisor at U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Ron Vitello, back with us once again. Ron, nice to see you. Thanks for coming in person. Of course. So there's been a lot of conversation about how this happened and the vetting process. What needs to be changed in the vetting process? What should have been changed in the vetting process?
Well, I think that what we're doing is doubling down, right? There is no question that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a complete disaster from soup to nuts. And so we're recovering from that as a country. Part of that was these refugees, many of them under-vetted, that came into the United States claiming asylum. And so we're in a situation where we're just not sure of how this happened. And so a review, but there's no question that the president, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Joe Edlow at USCIS, they're going to double down on the vetting to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that we're looking into the backgrounds of these people to pay down on what the president ran on.
But
securing the border and making sure our immigration system works for Americans.
What's going to change with the vetting process?
They're just going to double down on it. They're going to make sure that if there are people out there that we have questions about that were led in by the previous administration, that we find out who they are and that they're on the track that allowed them to come here.
So 190,000 Afghans in the United States since 2021. The New York Post is reporting there's about 5,000 Afghans brought to the U.S. That got flagged as quote-unquote national security issues. Here was the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem earlier today, and then we'll pick it up. She said that we need to essentially rely on other nations for help in this process. And when I heard that, it made me wonder why Americans should feel reassured with everything right now if we have to rely on other countries, other governments to help us.
Well, that's what the president announced, right? He said we're not going to take immigration from those countries until they get their act together, right? The secretary was saying we don't trust the documentation that the Afghanis use to passport their own people. So why are we giving people visas for that? So that's where we're going to get our arms around that to make sure. And again, it's the law of holes. Stop digging when there's a problem, right? So suspend things. Make sure that we're doing these things the right way, and maybe we don't need more people from Afghanistan. Maybe some of the people that are here need to go back.
How? Okay, so let's take both of those. Is the expectation of deportations?
Well, of course, yeah. If these people are a threat to the country, public safety, absolutely.
How long do you expect the pause to last? Like, are we talking months, years?
I really think it depends on what we're going to get from the partner countries, right? What are they going to do to improve their systems? And places like Somalia, Afghanistan, Venezuela, I don't think we're going to get a lot of cooperation.
There was a report in the New York Times, Homeland Security missions falter amid focus on deportations. Under Trump, an agency that kept Americans safe, resources have been diverted from combating child abuse, trafficking, and terrorism. That was a report in the Times just last month. Has the focus on deportations taken away from the anti-terrorism efforts at all?
I don't believe so. Not at CBP, not at the people that are coming, the visas that are being reviewed every day when, hundreds of thousands of people are coming to the United States. We're still doing all of that.
But how can you assure the American public that's the case? Like, at the end of the day, if an officer or a resource or a person is being used here, they can't be used there.
We have unprecedented resources from DHS, leadership at DHS that knows what the employees need to succeed. Back at the White House, we have President Trump telling us you need to go forward, secure the border. The results speak for themselves, right? The border looks safer now than it's ever been. And so continuing to do what we do if people are coming in as visitors or non-immigrants and immigrants that are coming, they're doubling down on the vetting makes a lot of sense. We have more resources in play now than we've ever had, unprecedented level of resources for us to succeed, and the policy's been right since January 20th.
Ron Vitello, Senior Advisor over at Customs and Border Protection. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, still to come. Here on the Hill, an accused assassin back in court. And his fans, yes, fans of an assassin, accused, still parked outside as both sides argue over evidence that could reshape the case against Luigi Mangione, the very latest of Mangione in court today, plus more than $1 billion in taxpayer dollars allegedly fleeced by scammers in Minnesota. The governor there, Tim Walz, under pressure, accused of letting fraud happen under his watch. How he's responding to the president tonight when we return. Welcome back. 6:30 here on the East Coast and in New York tonight is the man suspected of gunning down the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a New York City street last year. Back in court today. Luigi Mangione came in shackles but was uncuffed and wearing street clothes for his pretrial hearing. That hearing lasting several hours as his defense team tries to get key pieces of evidence tossed. Our Jessica Cartaglia live on the streets of New York City tonight with what went down inside that courtroom today. Hello, Jessica.
Hi, Blake. Yeah, so when you said street clothes, the first time that we've seen him in a suit, and of course this is big talk here because so many people were dying to see him. It's like watching a celebrity in a hearing. People gathered here last night. They got here bright and early this morning, mostly women, just excited to try to get a glimpse of Mangione. He came in through a side door. The hearing could determine what ultimately happens during this trial and the federal trial as well. As you mentioned, prosecutors want to introduce a backpack that had been seized. This is a key piece of evidence that the defense wants thrown out. This backpack was seized when he was arrested at that McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, allegedly containing a 3D printed gun, handwritten notes. And in those notes, Mangione allegedly wrote that he targeted Brian Thompson to prove a political point and to expose what he calls the parasitic nature of the healthcare industry. Again, the defense doesn't want that admissible in court because they're saying that that evidence was gathered illegally. Their search also unconstitutional. So the defense is really going to stick with that. Blake, legal experts tell us that the ruling could have major consequences for the prosecution's case if, in fact, that evidence is not admissible in court. It could certainly weaken the narrative around the prosecution. Dozens of his supporters, as I said, most of them women, came in. They wanted to see him, get a glimpse of him, and that was what happened here today.
How big were those crowds, Jessica? Like, we've seen this, you know, at other times Mangione's made appearances, and they keep coming out.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, we saw tents out here today, and, you know, it's more of just a circus. I wouldn't say the crowd was as large as the first time that he appeared, but we see kind of the usual people who are showing up. Many of them were dressed in Luigi, as in Mario and Luigi costumes. Somebody literally just walked by 2 seconds before we joined you asking if we were cheering for Mangione, and I said, no, we're just covering the story. So it's really interesting. Like I said, I think we'll see more people throughout, but it's not even so many people here, just as how crazy they are.
Again, accused of murdering a husband and a father. Jessica Cartaglia, live for us tonight in New York. Jessica, thank you. Meantime, in Tennessee, a special election taking place there tomorrow, and it is getting the presidential treatment, as the results could potentially be a gauge for how things might go in next year's midterm elections. The Democratic state representative, Afton Bain, is looking to upset the Republican, Matt Van Epps, in a race to replace retired Republican Congressman Mark Green. Republicans have controlled this ruby red district since 1983, decades. But this time it could be a close race. The Democrat trails the Republican by just 2%. According to a poll by Emerson College and The Hill, just last year, President Trump and the congressman who held that seat both won the district in the 20s. Today, President Trump called in as the House Speaker Mike Johnson also campaigned for Van Epps and slammed the Democrat in his remarks.
She said two things above all else that bothered me. Number one, she hates Christianity. Number two, she hates country music. How the hell can you elect a person like that?
Republicans hold a razor-thin majority, as you might know, in the House of Representatives, hence the focus, one of the reasons, on tomorrow. Well, in Minnesota now, the governor there, Tim Walz, fighting back, as more questions are raised about how a billion-dollar COVID funding scheme went unnoticed. Dozens have now been charged with stealing from a government program aimed at feeding children during the pandemic. Some say it's just a one-off scheme until others in Minnesota came to light, most of them within the local Somali community. Prosecutors now say more than $1 billion in taxpayer money was stolen. The individual is accused of setting up companies that build state agencies for millions of dollars worth of social services that never were provided. NewsNation reports that some of these funds could have gotten into the hands of al-Qaeda-linked terror group, that group known as al-Shabaab. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, announcing tonight that his department is investigating if and how those funds potentially made it to terrorists. Walz, under fire, responded to the allegations over the weekend.
Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals.
All right, so that's his response. Joining us now here on the Hill, the Speaker of the House there in Minnesota. Speaker of the House of Representatives, Lisa DeMuth, a Republican who is running against Governor Tim Walz. Lisa, thanks for being with us tonight. I appreciate you coming on. I should note to our audience, we invited Governor Walz on. That's a standing invitation. We hope we get to hear from him soon. Thanks for being with us. So look, you're welcome. So we're talking about a big problem here, right? Across the state, $1 billion. And the reality is when something is this big with a lot of money, it's not one person's fault. There's questions all over the place. And so I wonder how much, as the top Republican in the House there, in the state House for several years, how much the local lawmakers like yourself could have changed this, if there's any blame on that level.
Well, good afternoon, Blake. It's good to be with you. And yes, we have record fraud here in the state of Minnesota. It has gone on the entire time that Governor Walz has been in office. Your question whether or not legislators could be doing something, yes, we could have, and we actually tried. We had been sounding the alarm on this for years, but this year specifically, we wanted to put in an independent Office of Inspector General that would oversee the state and make sure fraud was being stopped. That was passed in the Senate in a highly bipartisan vote. But when we brought it to the House and tried to get that done here in the House of Representatives, the House Democrats blocked that bill and would not allow it to go forward. Even though the governor had said during his State of the State address, he said, pass a bill for an OIG, an independent OIG, put it on my desk, and I will sign it. But House Democrats blocked it.
You know, we saw this all across the country during COVID, Lisa, whether it was down south, northwest, up in the northeast, of just fraud, of funds going out in fraud. It happened in states run by Democrats. It happened in states run by Republicans. Minnesota, unfortunately, for your state, is sort of the poster child of all this. How do you unwind it down?
You know, we have to come to the fact that there is truly fraud and that we're finally getting national attention. Thank you for having me on tonight and having the chance to talk about this. The way we unwind it is to stop putting out payments to these fraudulent agencies, because every dollar that goes out in fraud means someone that is counting on it does not get the services that they are to be provided for. We've seen autism, specifically in the Somali population, increase almost triple to what the state average is in 4-year-olds. And so we have to look at these programs that are expanding, housing stabilization services going out in fraud, non-emergency medical transport going out in fraud. It is over and over and over where we've got an Office of Legislative Auditor that has pointed to these agencies saying that there's a lack of internal controls, but that has been ignored by Democrats here in the state for far too long.
You bring up the Somali community there, and look, you want to be the governor. I got to imagine if you win that race, your speech would say something along the lines of, I'm not the governor for Democrats, I'm not the governor for Republicans, I'm the governor for all people, right? That's what we hear politicians normally say. Here's the president, what he says about the Somali community. He says hundreds of thousands of refugees from Somalia are completely taking over the once great state of Minnesota. Those would be your constituents who you would represent. Do you agree with the president there, or is he going too far?
I think when we have seen this amount of fraud over the last 7+ years, that is what has to stop. My focus is going to be stopping fraud. When we go back into the legislative session in February, we want to put in that Office of Inspector General. We want to get that work done for Minnesotans from day one. We go back February 17th. That's the work that we need to do.
Should he be highlighting the Somali community?
We have seen an explosive expanse in autism services in different cultures and population, but fraud, no matter who is committing it, is illegal and it is wrong, and Minnesota taxpayers are tired of funding it.
Lisa DeMuth is running for the governor there. She is the top Republican there in the state house with us tonight here on the Hill. All the best. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Of course, still to come tonight. It is the question in this town, one of really a couple big ones. Was it a war crime or a lawful order?
The strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict.
The White House defending a second strike on alleged drug traffickers in the Caribbean, even as Republicans are now joining Democrats in questioning it. And the White House releases details of President Trump's MRI scan. But are the results raising additional questions? Full panel, other side. Stay with us.
The president has made it quite clear that if narco-terrorists, again, are trafficking illegal drugs towards the United States, he has the authority to kill them. And that's what this administration is doing.
That, of course, the press secretary Caroline Leavitt today facing questions about a report saying a second strike was ordered on an alleged drug boat to kill 2 survivors. The White House maintaining that the administration's strikes follow the rules of war. But critics say and question whether or not that is a war crime. Full panel here with me now. Sabrina Siddiqui, national politics reporter for The Wall Street Journal. Megan Hayes, former director of message planning in the Biden administration. And Bill McGinley, former cabinet secretary in the first Trump administration. Hello to you all. Hope you had an awesome holiday. Hope you had a great holiday. We come back to Washington to this. And the White House today is sort of on the defensive about confirming that there was a second strike on this boat, as we've seen time and again, these boats struck, but making the argument, Sabrina, that this is not a war crime.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Trump administration has been arguing from the outset that the United States is in an armed conflict with these drug cartels. That's been the rationale that they've used for going around the War Powers Act. And I think that, what you've heard actually for some time now is skepticism from both Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill about the use of these strikes because they say the administration has not presented evidence that these cartels pose an imminent threat to Americans. I think this is going to invite even more scrutiny because you have heard, Republican leaders saying that they want to investigate this, they want more information. The question will remain, what are they actually going to do about it? Right. Because just last month, Republicans voted down a resolution that would have reined in President Trump's authority to strike Venezuela. So I think that there is still that question about whether or not they'll exercise the control that they have, the authority they have within Congress to try and limit the types of the use of military force.
You think, Bill, that they should go on offense? Pete Hegseth, for your Christmas wish list, he shows a children's book targeting narco-terrorists. Why do you feel that way?
Because I think the lawyers looked at it. The White House and the DOD went to the law firm of the executive branch, which is the Office of Legal Counsel and the DOJ, who issued a classified opinion making the findings necessary, talking about fentanyl as a chemical weapon in the United States where 80,000 Americans a year die. And also just that this is a defensive measure under Article 2, Commander-in-Chief. The president has the obligation to defend the shores and borders of the United States. And so I think what the White House needs to do and the Department of Defense is go on offense. I think what they need to do is practice the politics of addition, get their Republican allies in the Senate and the House on board with this, brief them up, and show the threat to the national security that these cartels. I mean, we waited on Al-Qaeda until they struck. What we need to do with these cartels, given the danger that they pose to the United States, the administration should make the case, it can make the case, and it needs to activate its congressional allies and go on offense.
I think that they're losing allies here because of stuff like this coming out where they have a double tap strike and people who are alive were now dead. And that is a war crime, and that is going to be proven that it is illegal to do that. Who gave the order and what they can actually do about it are 2 different things. But also, 99% of fentanyl comes through the southern border through legal citizens of the United States. So their whole argument here and their whole ability to brief Congress is a little suspect in general. And I think that is why they are starting to lose some of their allies here that they have in Congress.
What do you think happens here? So that's September 2nd. Let's look forward, because there was this big meeting at the White House today. Something you probably might have coordinated or been involved in the last term. And now the commander-in-chief has a really big decision to make inside Venezuela. What do you think happens?
I think that they're going to get through this congressional process first. I think they have to. I think what they need to do is get their allies in Congress on board, defending the administration, looking at everything, and I think they got to make the case publicly. I think that Carolyn Leavitt's done an amazing job. The president always does a good job on this, and I think Pete Hegseth and other people from the national security apparatus need to start briefing reporters with the background information about how this can be done. I mean, this is, if you are going to take these steps in the Western Hemisphere, have a muscled up Monroe Doctrine, then you have to be able to make the case publicly.
What do you think he does?
Wouldn't it be lovely to be able to brief reporters who are inside the Pentagon? But, oh, wait, they kicked them all out. So now there's no credible reporters that are still there. But I do think they do need to brief reporters. They do need to brief Congress. But the problem is they don't have any legal ground here. And so I think that someone is going to take
You and I are going to disagree on that.
That's right. Someone's going to take the fall here publicly. And it seems like the admiral is the first one to go. They were very quickly to throw him under the bus on this. So I do think that Congress is going to want someone to take the fall because they know Congress doesn't really have a lot of actions that they can do.
Big meeting at the White House today. The White House wasn't tipping its hand. No surprise.
No surprise at all. And I think that there's also a separate question here about whether this is purely about cracking down on drug trafficking, or are there other motivations at play, right? And there have been a lot of questions from lawmakers about whether this is actually also about regime change in Venezuela. And when you're making decisions about a possible increased U.S. troop presence, that's when you're also going to have a lot of lawmakers who are really reluctant to potentially send Americans to war. They don't even want to take a vote, frankly, on authorizing, another war. I think that's something we've seen time and again. And I really do think that when you kind of come back to the big picture here, it does kind of stand in contrast to what President Trump has said about reining in the U.S. role in military conflicts overseas. And I think that's also a big piece that could potentially hurt him with his supporters if they see this as actually another example of U.S. military adventure.
Marjorie, the final point.
Real quick.
The military gives meaning to the words the diplomats speak to our foreign adversaries and friends. And so I think the military buildup in the Caribbean and around South and Central America is allowing Marco Rubio and others to do the diplomacy to get what they want.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, fix health insurance, not regime change in Venezuela. To your point and sort of what they're having to deal with inside the party. All right, meantime, the White House trying to clear the air today on President Trump's health, revealing the results of his MRI.
The purpose of this imaging is preventative, to identify any issues early, confirm overall health, and ensure the president maintains long-term vitality and function. President Trump's cardiovascular imaging was perfectly normal.
All right, so there were questions about the MRI that he talked about, and they released it today. You used to deal with like this stuff of how to go about it. Obviously, given everything that we saw and happened last year, how do you think that they're handling this? What's the right way to go about it?
Well, I think the right way would we need to have younger leaders. So that would be the first issue here.
The reality is there was an 80-something-year-old president. Now there's a 79-year-old president. So
which is not.
Right.
I do think they need to be more transparent. The fact that Trump didn't know what was even happening, 2/3 of the American people think that he's too old to do the job. They don't think he's being transparent with his health. So I do think that the American people here are starting to ask questions. And I don't think that Trump is ever going to have to pay a political price. But people up on the Hill are going to have to do that.
I think anybody who's worked with this president understands he goes 20 hours a day and runs 20-year-olds into the ground. He is perfectly fine.
Look, I think his days have gotten shorter. There was a New York Times investigation showing just that. And there have been questions about, the marks on his hands and some other questions about, his own acuity. But, the transparency factor, we saw an issue with it in the last administration. We're seeing an issue with it in this administration. There's no real rule book here. That's what a lot of, historical, documentarians say, is that there's no playbook for transparency on the president's health.
And also, speaking from experience, once you have to start defending his health like this, you're already losing.
And you invite more questions.
You are already losing.
You invite more questions.
Even if the accusations have no merit.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Still to come. Why you will find a whole lot more than weapons and troops on America's military bases. I'll explain. All right, if you're just getting home, trying to catch up on today's top stories, here's some of the Hill headlines. Cool name, right? What we call it now. All right, appeals court upholds Alina Habba disqualification in New Jersey. A 3-judge panel there for the Third Circuit unanimously ruling that she has not been lawfully serving as U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey. Now, questions about what happens there. Also, for a lot of you flyers out there, flying without real ID may cost you $45 under the new TSA program. So if you arrive to the airport without that proper ID, look for the star there at the top right of your license. You could pay the extra fee to get through the security line this holiday season. And finally, speaking of holidays, White House unveils holiday decor theme, Home is Where the Heart Is. The First Lady, Melania Trump, ushering in the holidays with decorations that the White House calls an ode to the enduring American spirit of generosity, patriotism, and gratitude. This is the White House. Tours start back up tomorrow, by the way, after they were paused due to construction of President Trump's ballroom, and I think during the government shutdown as well. Returning visitors will be greeted by this, a White House made of gingerbread. Yes, that's right. That is a 120 pounds worth of gingerbread that gives a view into the president's private residence. To check out those stories and more, all you have to do is head on over to thehill.com. All right, time for my take tonight before we head on out. Now, when deciding who to follow when it comes to the latest finance trends, you might picture the Wall Street player, right? Pocket square, sipping a martini, whatever you think. Well, turns out when it comes to trying to capitalize on the cryptocurrency surge, it's 20-something-year-old U.S. service members who you might want to pay attention to. Get this, the Wall Street Journal reports that when it analyzed tax returns and when it came to reporting ownership or sales of crypto, 7 of the top 15 most active zip codes were home to military bases. You see here, anywhere from 16 to 19% of people living in that area dabbling in crypto. Now, the starting entry salary for each branch of the armed services, just under 30 grand a year. The Space Force is the exception, under 50,000. Supplemental income can really make a big difference, but of course, like any financial play, there are no guarantees, especially in the roller coaster crypto world. Now, the returns are from 2021, so we'll have to see how this all plays out. But would it shock you if this trend continues? After all, it puts the concept of risk-taking into a whole new perspective. I thank you for watching us tonight here on The Hill. Elizabeth Vargas reports just